Here is something that the exam now asks you, which is about AWS Local Zones. So the idea is that we have these availability zones and these regions all around the world, but now there's the concept of local zones, which allows you to place compute storage database and other services that are selected by AWS closer to end users to run latency sensitive applications. So the idea is that you will extend your AWS region to one or more locations, one or more quote unquote availability zones, one or more, then they're actually called local zones. So this is compatible with EC2, RDS, ECS, EBS, Elastic Cache, Direct Connect, and so on. And so here's an example, and we'll see this in the hands-on very quickly. So there's a region, Northern Virginia, US East 1, and it has 6 AZ by default, but you can extend these AZs with more local zones. So you have Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Miami, and so on. So how does that work? Well, here's your region, US East 1, with 2 AZs, but it's possible for you to define a local zone in Boston and then extend your VPC to be going across these AZs and local zones. And then you would be able to launch an EC2 instance into this local zone. Now that may be confusing, so let's go into the console to see how that works. So I am in the EC2 console, and let me first pick a region that does not have a local zone. For example, let me pick Europe, Ireland. So I'm going to pick Europe, Ireland, and then under settings right here, there is zones. So I'm going to click on zones, and as you can see, in Ireland, we have 3 AZs right here. They're enabled by default, and this is it. There's no local zone, nothing else, right? But if I switch to US East 1 for Northern Virginia, as we can see, now we have a lot of options. We have local zones, and then if I scroll down, we have wavelength zones, and then we have the availability zones. So we have 6 AZ in US East 1, okay? So they're enabled by default, but our focus right now is local zones. We can enable a local zone. For example, if we knew that we had users in Boston and we really want them to have low latency access to our applications directly from Boston, then we can enable the local zone in Boston. So I will manage this, and then I will enable this local zone and update the zone group. And then I will say, yes, enable. So now Boston is actually going to be enabled. So let me just wait for it to take effect. So I just refreshed, and as you can see now, the US East Boston, so US East 1, Boston 1 is enabled. And so what that means is that if I go into my instances and launch an instance, choose Amazon Linux 2, and then T2 Micro, just to show you, then in the instance details, in terms of network, we have our VPC, and in terms of subnets, we still have our 6 subnets, but it's possible for us to create a new subnet. And this is quite advanced, so you don't have to follow along with me if you don't understand what I'm doing. But we choose the subnets. We'll call it Boston subnets. And for the AZ, I can actually choose my US East 1, Boston 1 subnets. And now for the setter block, so don't worry if you don't understand, this is really advanced and this is not going to be asked at the exam. So I will choose 172.31.96.0/20. Don't ask me why this is more advanced in the networking bit of AWS, but I just want to show you that we can create a subnet and associate it with a local zone. Okay, so we are creating a subnet. It's successful. Now back into my launch wizard, I can just refresh the VPC. And then here I have the option to choose my Boston subnet. So that's it really. I will not go ahead with creating the EC2 instance, but at least you saw that it is possible for us to extend our VPC to local zones and therefore deploy EC2 instances closer to our users. That's it for this lecture. I hope you understand now what local zones are, and I will see you in the next lecture.